Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the lecture on the impact of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we are joined by Esther. A little bit about Esther Schagen-van Luit. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. She is a leading lady in cyber. She is currently Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft Netherlands. With many years of experience in cybersecurity, Esther has a proven track record of delivering impactful solutions, research, tools, and services for a diverse range of clients and stakeholders, having been the principal for Europe at the Information Security Forum, CISO of Deloitte Netherlands, Dutch Caribbean, Deloitte Legal in Belgium, and a consultant with Deloitte previously. Ms. Schagen-van Luit holds several relevant credentials, including an MSc in cybersecurity. Esther has a unique combination of IT, cybersecurity, risk, organizational transformation, DAY, and ESG knowledge. Esther is also an advocate for women's rights and opportunities. She improves diversity and inclusion in the cybersecurity field as a Sir Topiro and a founding member of the Female Forum. Esther, thank you so much for being here today, and I will turn my mic off so that I can speak.
Thank you, Emma. And what a warm welcome. All of you are clapping and giving me hearts even before I said anything. That's a great start. I don't need to say anything. So today I will be speaking to you about the impact of artificial intelligence on the cybersecurity industry. As Emma mentioned, I work for Microsoft, and so in many ways we're at the forefront of what's happening there and how organizations are incorporating AI in their organizations and in their security teams as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I wanted to start off with something that happened quite a long time ago. So I'm very curious to hear who is familiar or knows what this picture is about. But this is the DARPA CGC, the Cyber Grand Challenge that was held in 2016. And if you've got nothing else to do tonight, I recommend you go onto YouTube and type this in and find something, the finale or the explanations of how it works. But this was basically the first contest that DARPA organized around getting a number of AI systems in a room and having them battle it out when it comes to cybersecurity. So the AI machines were tasked with competing on keeping up their own availability, defending and fixing any vulnerabilities that they had, while also at the same time attacking and bringing down the enemy AI systems. So in terms of esports, this is, I know, way back. It's almost 10 years back, but we were already doing this 10 years back. So if you want to have a good watch, move over to YouTube and go and watch it. But, since then, we're 10 years ahead. What has happened in the industry then? How are we using AI systems today? And what are some of the benefits and risks that we're seeing in this area? That will be what I'll be covering today. And the winner of this competition, by the way, was an AI system, Mayhem, and we'll be talking a little bit more about what happened to Mayhem later on. So Emma already gave a wonderful introduction, but I am functioning in the role of Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft. And originally I've been a CISO and a strategy consultant, which is a mix that I try to bring back in my current work. And my mission, oh yes, very important. And I was an HCSS intern 12 years ago. So always very happy to work together with the Cyber Summer Schools because in a way, this is also my own origin. This is where I started working on my first cybersecurity project. And as you can tell, I stuck around with it and I really, really like it still. My mission in this role is to be the strategic counterpart for customer executives on cybersecurity. So many of them, of course, use Microsoft's products on a day-to-day basis, and it's all very much, we're doing security now, and we're doing productivity now. But many of my customers also have the desire to look into the future. What is happening with the cyber threat landscape? Where is AI going? How can we leverage it? What are things that Microsoft is seeing and learning from everything it does around the world? Because, of course, because we work with so many customers, we see a lot of what's happening in the world, and we'd love to share that knowledge back to our customers. So in terms of what I actually do in this role, which is always a question I get asked, is I'm a sounding board for my customers on cybersecurity strategy and programs, which fits really nicely with my management consultancy experience, where I did transformational programs on cybersecurity. I am the liaison to the Microsoft internal security department, so our own CISO. I lead the incident response outreach to customers in case there's a Microsoft internal incident. And then I'm the right hand for the Dutch board on cybersecurity and support them in their conversations. So a really diversified role, but I just wanted to tell you about this because it might not be a role that you initially think of when you think of, what you're going to do when you move into the cybersecurity industry. You maybe say, oh, I'm going to do security awareness or SOC analyst. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about this to show what diversity of roles there is actually that you can do within this industry. And the diversity continues to increase as, of course, we see the field grow and new needs arise. For instance, as we're seeing now with artificial intelligence. These are some of the topics that I really like talking about. So even though I do have a technical background in security as well, I have really enjoyed moving towards that spectrum of combining business thinking and systems thinking with what's happening in cybersecurity. So actually, I got the question the other day around what do I read to keep up to date with security? And of course, there are the news articles that I see, but those are more point in time things. I really enjoy reading about the larger trends in technology, society, ethics, and then combining that back into what that means for cybersecurity and what organizations should be doing with that knowledge. And then this topic, why is this an important topic to have a lecture on? So the colleagues from HCSS showed me the list of topics you have lectures on, and they're very extensive. So why this one? Because honestly, I speak at a lot of events, and I think the audience that I engage with, they've heard AI so many times, they're completely sick of it. Like everybody wants to use it, but can we please not have another talk about AI? Which is difficult because Microsoft is doing a lot of things in AI, and I love talking about secure and safe AI. But this, I think, so when they asked me what I wanted to talk about for songs, I felt this was a really important topic because a number of things are changing in the industry because of AI, cybersecurity industry specifically. So of course, AI is changing the way that we work, which has some implications for what we should be doing in cybersecurity. It is democratizing certain skill sets. It is changing the threat landscape as we know it. It is also helping us do cyber defense, which is the upside. And then, of course, it's another thing that we need to secure. So we'll also speak a little bit about additional security controls that we require in order to have an effective implementation of AI. So these are the 5 topics that I'm going to touch upon today. So let's get us started with AI is changing the way that we work. There was a wonderful survey by IC2, which is an organization that some of you might know. They're responsible for the CISP certification, and they did a survey around how people perceive artificial intelligence affecting their roles within the cybersecurity industry. So one of the questions that they asked was, what do you think? Will AI make some parts of your job obsolete? And 65% of the people said that they thought it would, which is a significant part, right? But focus, it says part of my job. So it doesn't per se mean all of my job. And we'll be touching a little bit more around what parts of the job are likely to become obsolete and whether this is a good or a bad thing. Basically, a lot of people think that the work that they currently do will partially no longer be their work in the future. And then another question that they ask is whether AI will improve the job efficiency for security professionals. And here, the overwhelming majority said 82% that they think it will really change up the role in terms of what they can get done. And I just wanted to bring an example of very practically where we would see that efficiency arising, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about areas in cybersecurity where AI is making a big impact and some where it struggles a little bit more. But security operations has always been an area where we've done a lot of automation, a lot of pattern detection. And so security operations is one of the areas in which we're seeing a rapid development of AI simply because it lends itself so well with pattern recognitions and actions. So some of the examples that AI can really support is quickly triaging requests and tickets, prioritizing work items, gathering knowledge retrieval from different sources, doing a risk assessment based very quickly based on knowledge from the past. And then that last part, point 7, is one that we're really hearing a lot of good feedback about, is incident reporting. So as a CISO, I also had my own security operations team, and they love the hunt. right? They loved, oh, there's an incident happening. Let me look at what that means. How do I resolve it? And then it was done, and they needed to write a report, and they hated writing a report. And here we've got things like Copilot, which is just helping you to say, oh, this is the format in which I'd like to report. Please summarize the entire incident and the actions we took, and voila, there is a report. So this is just an example of how we can take some of the work that we definitely should be doing in AI can help us because it is relatively formulaic and standardized, and it has all the information to fill it in for us automatically. And it so happens to take care of a task that people who are typically in this role really don't enjoy doing. So that's some of the promise that it holds already. And then there's the important matter of the cybersecurity skills gap. So I love talking about cybersecurity skills gap, which is typically the difference in quantity and quality between the demand and supply of cybersecurity professionals needed in the industry. Now, there's a variety of studies out there. The IC Squared Cybersecurity Workforce Report is, again, the biggest report that and they do a yearly report on this where they track the number, and it usually contains a pretty big number. And then if you go on LinkedIn, you'll find people who are terribly upset, say the number isn't this big or the number is even bigger. It's a hot topic in the industry. So we look at the quantity, the difference purely between the number of professionals demanded and the number of professionals supplied. And we see in 2024, the statistics of IC Square said we would need 10.2 million professionals worldwide. And we only had 5.5 professionals. So that would lead to a gap of 4.8 million professionals needed, which is a significant gap, right? It's almost half. So if we then see what's happening over time, we see that in 2024, the year-on-year workforce demand globally rose by 19%. So that is significant. And if we then look at what happened to supply, there was barely any change. So you can see that over time, and that is also if you go back to the years you've seen this change, is that this gap seems to just be ever widening. We have way too much demand and not enough people to help us here. And so that begs the question, can AI close part of the cybersecurity skills gap? Because if it can take those parts of our jobs that we don't like to do and it is good and efficient in, maybe that can actually be seen as a co-pilot, as an additional worker, which frees up our time to do more impactful work. So that is the message of hope that I see in terms of AI changing the way that we work and actually helping us in the cybersecurity industry to get more done. Because right now, looking at these numbers, it seems like we have insufficient people to protect the things that we want to protect. I wanted to include a separate note on the Netherlands, which was called out specifically in the report. So the Netherlands has a significant supply growth, interestingly, of 8% year on year, which is the third highest on the global ranking. And we also had dropping demand. So we were one of only 5 countries worldwide to see a decrease in our gap in 2024, which is still a gap. But with that, we were exceptionally rare, and I can't say exactly why that is the case. So we're a little bit different, but in general, I find when I talk to my customers that lots of my CISOs, they have vacancies in their teams that they're unable to fill. Then there is also the quality gap. So 90% of the organizations say they can't find people with the right skills. So maybe in terms of numbers, they are there, but we've got, I don't know, 90 people who do security awareness, and we were really just looking for a SOC analyst. So this is the mismatch that we're talking about in case of the cybersecurity skills gap. And IC Squared also asked what kind of skills were the most in demand for the people that they were looking for and couldn't find. And interestingly, at the top here, you see artificial intelligence with 34%. Now, I think that is an interesting statement to make because I don't think many companies know exactly what they're asking for when they say they want somebody with an artificial intelligence skill set. And I don't think the curriculum around doing security for artificial intelligence is so mature that you can just go and get a certification or a diploma and that will prove something about AI security. I think this field is very much in flux. But of course, I was talking about AI helping us close that cybersecurity skills gap. But here in the second graph, you effectively see it's also contributing to the skills gap in the sense that many organizations are asking for professionals with a skill set that doesn't even seem to be formally defined yet. So what the net result of that is, I leave to you. I look forward to seeing the results of the next IC2 report on this. And then moving on to something that we call the cybersecurity culture crisis. Now, I know that many of you are aspiring cybersecurity professionals, and you should definitely join us in this industry because it is wild and there's so much to learn, and I love it. I mean, I've been around for a long time, um, since starting with HCSS. But there is also something going on in the industry that we insufficiently talk about. And honestly, we could get some young and fresh professionals to be more comfortable to talk about it. But we see that 11% of people who decide to change roles who are working in cybersecurity decide to move out of cybersecurity altogether, which is, a lot. I think it's a lot. I mean, it's effectively 1/10 of your population saying, I've done cybersecurity and now I'm moving to another role. And it's not entirely clear why this is happening, but there's some other research that has supporting factors that maybe there's something in the culture that we should seek to address as an industry. So first of all, we saw that since 2022, job satisfaction has come down within the cybersecurity industry. I have some hypotheses around why that is, but we would be spending another hour on this topic here. So let's move on to the part where AI actually makes sense. 46% of people cite high work stress, and then 81% of those blaming the evolving threat landscape. Now, and I think this was done clearly before the current geopolitical situation. I can tell you that the threat landscape has further evolved, further stressing these people. Probably. But particularly in the incident response side, I think that is a relatively stressful part of the role. You are always on, you are always ready to respond. It draws in a certain type of people who love doing it. But at the same time, and this is also my experience as a CISO, I loved working on incident because it felt that I really mattered in that moment and that I was doing something good for society. But at the same time, you have to understand that you sometimes work in evenings, you sometimes work in the weekends. It can be tough. So I completely get the work stress and that you cannot do that for your entire life unless you're like made of steel. And we don't talk a lot about it enough in this industry, I think. So that's one of the things we should address. And then we have 32%, and I think the Gen Z people on this call will agree because it's important to me too. 32% of the staff switching roles as they demand remote work options. Of course, you've seen the return to the office news. There's many people who don't like that. And in cybersecurity, we are used to being very effective through remote work. So this return to the office mandate is not landing well with many cybersecurity staff. We're also seeing 56% of workers that are over 45. And we're seeing insufficient junior talents in the pipeline. So again, we need you. Come and join us in the industry if you aren't there, because apparently we've only got old people. And 59% of cybersecurity teams feel underfunded to do their work well. And this is a big topic, right? Because you are responsible to take care of a certain amount of risk. And if you don't have the people and you don't have the money to do it, that is in itself stressful. So it always depends a little bit on economic upswings, downturns, how much money teams like that have. But whenever there is an economically more tough time and teams see their budget cut, that adds to the level of stress. So I think these are some of the underlying factors that are making people less happy to be working in this field, and for some people a consideration to be fleeing the field, which again, you're not allowed to do. You should definitely join us because it's good fun overall. But where I think AI can really help is that some parts of our work, and it depends a little bit on your role, but they contain tasks that just aren't exciting. They're routine, they're mundane, they're unexciting, but they need to happen. And I think that is where AI can really play a role to make our work much more interesting and diverse and free us up for value add tasks. So that is my plea where I think AI can really turn around the quality of some of the work that we do. And the reason I talk so much about this is because actually this was part of my graduation topic when I did my master's in cybersecurity. So I used something called the NIST framework, the Workforce Framework for Cybersecurity by NIST. And they've made an overview of roles, tasks, knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to do those tasks. And so my thesis was around trying to understand what part of those tasks AI could do for us. So that was back in 2017, but honestly, I don't think it's dramatically changed. So if we look at non-outsourceable tasks, 40% of those were difficult to outsource with the current state of where AI was in 2017. Then another around 40% is partially outsourceable. So you need AI human collaboration there. And then 22% of the tasks be outsourceable. And if we then plotted that onto some of the areas, so the NIST framework basically works in seven areas. So you see overseeing, govern, they're more around the risk management side, steering, governance, and then securely provision. So these are more the prevent and protect kind of controls. These areas, so architecture would be in there, for instance. These areas would be more difficult to outsource. So they're relatively human because they require, I guess, a lot of information and a lot of decision making and a lot of interaction with stakeholders to get there. Partially outsourceable tasks were in collect and operate, which is basically information gathering, and then operation and maintenance. And then the bottom three areas, protect and defend, analyze and investigate, are your traditional security operations, security defense, incident response, where we see a lot of tasks that are potentially outsourceable to artificial intelligence. So the top human roles were these, where there were a lot of a high percentage of the tasks that simply couldn't be outsourced to artificial intelligence. So those of you that are inspiring enterprise architects, good on you. It seems like you'll have a job in the future. Top outsourceable roles would be roles with a relatively high percentage of tasks that could be relegated to artificial intelligence. Now, have we seen all of this happen in practice, even 8 years on? No, it's not the case. Theoretically, they're outsourceable, but it really depends on what tools and, of course, what systems and processes organizations have in place. But just wanted to show you the difference between some of the roles in the industry and how well they can interact with artificial intelligence or relegate a part of their tasks to artificial intelligence. Because I think as a human being working in this industry, that is very interesting to me. And it's always good to be using my former thesis results and still share them, because I still think that what was in there is very, very relevant to today. But very well, moving on to the second topic, AI is democratizing certain skill sets. So this is what I meant when I said that AI didn't per se change that much versus 8 years ago. I think many of the underlying capabilities still hold, but what we've definitely seen with the rise of ChatGPT and everything that followed afterwards is, of course, an entirely new group of people having access to artificial intelligence, Gen AI specifically in this case, and having a UI to interact with it as they're used to interacting with some of the other applications. So many more people have gotten access to Gen AI, then started experimenting with AI, and are now finding, depending on how they're using it and what they want to use it for, is that some skills that they didn't have, they can now make happen with the support of artificial intelligence, which I think is a wonderful thing. However, some of these things do have impact on the cyber threat landscape and what we can do in terms of defense, but we'll get to that shortly. So some of the things that we're seeing is no code or natural language programming. We're of course seeing translation from all languages to all languages. That looks relatively good, which is used in a lot of phishing campaigns. We're seeing enhanced use of MS Office applications, and I'm not just saying this because I work for Microsoft, but for instance, my Visual Basic is not great, but all of a sudden I can do a lot more things in Excel with the help of Copilot. And we're seeing the same thing. So I do happen to be a little bit better with PowerPoint, but people who have never learned how to use PowerPoint properly or have no design skills, all of a sudden they can make a decent looking presentation with Gen AI. So that is really helping people out with skill sets that they didn't have before and are now very easy to access. Of course, it also offers the integration with automated workflows. We see Copilot in particular being used a lot as brainstorming and a sparring partner for people. Graphics and video design. Definitely my video design skills are not impressive. So here I find a lot of value in particular. We're seeing it used as a data analytics engine, personal assistant, project manager, for those of you who don't like making project plans, service desk, which of course has an implication for the bad guys again. And the list goes on as we continue to explore what AI can mean for us. So these use cases, we're almost discovering it as we're working more with it. At least that's my personal experience. I work a lot with it and I discover new things that I can do with it. So it's an ongoing process. So we'll find many more skill sets that we can likely democratize and that people can continue to grow in and get more stuff done. Like I said, it does mean a couple of things of what we're seeing in the threat landscape and how we defend ourselves. So I want to move on to how AI is changing the threat landscape. This, by the way, is a visual from the DARPA competition where you see a system attacking another system. There's many cool visuals in there. But yes, AI as an attacker or as a support for hackers. And we're seeing it currently predominantly in situations where they use AI to scale their existing business models. So automated target identification, functioning as a service desk, supporting with code writing, gathering data on potential targets, crossing language barriers, for instance, in those phishing campaigns, and supporting with social engineering. And of course, we're also seeing some new business models pop up with deepfakes and automated attack patterns. One of the applications which we really saw in 2024 is election interference. So 2024 was a special year as half of the world's population from 70 countries voted in their national elections, making it the biggest election year in history. And unfortunately, that gave the bad guys around the world a lot of potential to interfere. So this is an overview of some campaigns and influence operations that Microsoft observed as part of several elections. So you see the Taiwanese election, which had Chinese interference. And then, of course, we saw Russia, China again, and Iran as well. The maturity of these threat actors when they use artificial intelligence widely varies, but we'll step into that a little bit later. So here, most of us, I guess, are thinking of the US elections as a primary candidate for interference, but really it's elections around the world where actors are starting to influence outcomes using both physical means and cyber means. And what I wanted to do is have a look at the Chinese influence operations since they are particularly mature. So like I said, some of these groups, they're very like, oh, we've just discovered ChatGPT and we had it do something for us, which is, very amateurish. But the Chinese have a history of influencing and have discovered AI as a great supporting technology. So that's why I feel it's really interesting to have a look at how they work. Their goals with influence operations are, on the one hand, to spread propaganda on nations that they consider to be unfriendly and to try and soften China's image abroad. So those are the two goals. They have significantly invested resources in making sure that they reach an audience in a lot of countries and a diversity of languages. They have over 230 state media employees who act as social media influencers across major Western platforms. These influencers are all trained. They are recruited and trained like it's a professional organization led by the China Radio International and other state media outfits. And that has, it's a case study in influencing, really. It's very impressive. They have a combined reach of over 103 million people across platforms in over 40 languages. So I think your average influencer would be impressed with China. What they focus on is politically divisive topics. So for instance, in the US election, they didn't really pick a side on Trump or Harris. They just sought to disrupt. So they talk a lot about gun violence, what they think of US political figures, what they think of things that the US is doing in the world. And initially it was quite awkward, but it became more and more professional as time went on. So to the right, you see some of the topics that they've addressed, and then some of the exemplary content with images that were AI generated, but look quite real. Moving on from that, some other things that they were involved in is, for instance, the derailment of, they weren't involved in the derailment of the train. They covered the derailment of a train carrying molten sulfur, and then spin a narrative around it in terms of that the US government was hiding something, likening it to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. It's a cover-up. You can't trust your own government. That was the entire narrative they sought to spin around that. Another one was the Maui wildfires of 2023, where there were wildfires, but they accused the US government of using a weather weapon and spread that in over 31 languages. And then this last example is where Japan's decision to dispose of treated radioactive wastewater into the Pacific Ocean was used to imply that the US was seeking to poison the water supply of the rest of the world to establish a water hegemony. And you again see like this is some content in Korean. It's really quite diverse and localized. Here's some more content, and at the bottom, I wanted to call it the timeline of AI influence in the Taiwanese elections. To the right, we've got like it ranges from memes to a fully AI-generated TV persona. So that is the two ladies at the top. They're not real presenters; they're AI-generated personas. And to the upper right, we've got somebody, a dissident who was deepfaked in speaking in a derogatory way about religion. So it's not just images or posts on X. It is creating full fake presenters and deepfakes of people, and then doing that across an entire election campaign. So the Taiwanese elections was in fact the first time where we saw a full influencing campaign running alongside of presidential elections. So very concerning, but very interesting to see what these threat actors are starting to use AI for. So that is the bad news. I think we're moving up from here. We're going to more positive content again, trust me. So AI is also helping us to do cyber defense, which I know is the part you've all been waiting for. So again, moving back to my thesis, basically we say there's three types of tasks in this world: mundane tasks, formal tasks, and expert tasks. And so looking at mundane tasks, they're very, they use a lot of your senses, it's vision, it's speech, it's common sense, it's navigating. So there's a lot of things that you should be able to do like you are a child. So a good example is to get to school in the morning, which is a very easy task for a child once you've taught them the way and they're not in a super dangerous environment, I suppose. But teaching AI how to do that wasn't that simple in the first place. And a cybersecurity example of this from that NIST standard is, for instance, consulting with customers to evaluate functional requirements. The formal tasks, they're more like playing chess. So they have an initial state, a goal state, a valid state set, so a valid set of options, a set of performable operations. So that is very much like into games and mathematics. There's rules. And these makes for tasks that are very easy to explain to artificial intelligence. And these are typically the tasks that we see outsourced first to artificial intelligence. So in terms of having that cybersecurity example, performing validation steps, comparing the actual results with the expected results, and then analyzing the gap and giving that as an output, that is something that is relatively formal and works well if you give it to artificial intelligence. And then the expert tasks are things that we consider to be difficult because we've spent years of training on it. So for instance, being a doctor or conducting financial analyses. A general example is giving a medical diagnosis. And then the cybersecurity example would be something around architecture, threat modeling. And this is an area where we initially weren't very successful in terms of giving that to AI, but we've become much better at it over the last couple of years. So surprisingly, we do see progress in the mundane tasks areas as we see, developments around vision, around speech, but it is something that is very easy for humans, and it just takes quite a bit of work to get an AI to do it properly. Formal tasks are relatively easy. And then the expert tasks, we have really become much better at doing that as we've made a lot of things that we thought were implicit, explicit, and then we're able to give it to artificial intelligence. Yes, Emma?
Hi, sorry for interrupting. I just have received that some people are able to see your slides, other people aren't. So maybe if you could try sharing them again, or otherwise I can try sharing them.
I will.
Thank you.
Again. Let's see. Can you validate with the person who said they couldn't see
Yeah.
whether they can see?
Can someone give me a thumbs up or okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, people can see it. Yeah. All right. Perfect.
Great,
Yes,
thank
people
you.
are. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks for your patience.
No worries. Taking some of that as a practical application and harnessing AI to detect and disrupt cyber attacks, which is honestly the part in enterprises where we're seeing AI used in the cybersecurity context a lot. So yes, of course, you can use Gen AI to draft security policies. You will get a security policy. Will it be fabulous? Probably not, because it needs a lot of nuanced understanding of how your organization works for it to make sense. So we're all seeing a lot of applications where people are trying to make Gen AI and AI work for other areas, but so far, security operations, detecting and responding to cyber attacks is an area where we see a lot of progress, where it comes very naturally, if you will. So in particular, AI seems to be very, very good at detecting hidden attacks with hands-on keyboards. So LLMs are fine-tuned to identify suspicious activities and then can learn a lot from the context and semantics to flag those potential threats. Then it's possible to automatically disrupt attacks depending on the risk level that we see. So combining that endpoint detection with a response from the AI. So that means automatically isolating the affected device and temporarily disabling compromised user accounts. So just an example, if I go back to the time where I was a CISO, I would have somebody on my team. They would be on call, like we would have 24/7 coverage. And as soon as they concluded that something was dangerous, they had the opportunity to isolate the affected device and then temporarily disable that user account. They would come to me, ask me for permission. I'd say yes. But of course, you can imagine there is a difference in the time elapsed between such an event taking place, my guy seeing it, my guy calling me, me saying it's okay to do it, then them doing it. With AI, we now have the potential, and of course, you need to fine tune it because there's always a business impact. Like if it's a legitimate user and you're blocking them from doing the work, that's not great either. But it's now much better and quicker to do it with the support of AI, and you can get to quite a fine tuned model of when to do it or not to do it. And then we're seeing AI extended across cybersecurity. So data is power when it comes to cybersecurity because we build quite complex models of contextual knowledge to decide whether something is dangerous or not dangerous. So the more quality data that goes into that, the better you are able to say this is really dangerous and this is just a false positive. And AI is really helping us to do that. So because data typically lives in silos across the organization and it can be quite difficult to access that. So this is where we see AI make another big difference. And I'm using Copilot here because that is what we've got data on, but on average, it would take 277 days to find and contain a breach. And in 2023, we looked again at novice users who had started using Copilot for security, and they were 26% faster and 44% more accurate, so less false positives. So it really has the potential to make us much faster and better at detecting things and responding to them. And then here a quick overview of the difference of how that works. So traditionally, we work according to a rules-based approach where you get an alert that is classified into a bucket of dangerousness based on the rules that we put together. And then it chooses, one of the preset actions to respond to that buckets. With generative AI, it's a little bit more custom made. So you get an alert again, and there is predictive remediation going on where it says, well, actually, I think it's this. And it builds a custom remediation task for that specific alert. So it's less predefined, more flexible, more fine-tuned. And that's why we see it making the difference. Moving on to the last category is AI is asking for certain security controls. So artificial intelligence can be a target in your organization because effectively you have just expanded your attack surface. And what we're seeing a lot is that organizations are really rushing their implementation of artificial intelligence. Like everybody wants to experience the productivity gains, but that also means that there's an increased tendency to bring things to market or put them in production while there must still be vulnerabilities in there. Also, in part because we don't always understand properly how AI was built or how it works and how to find the vulnerabilities in the first place. So that presents us with a risk, as it's not only an extension of our attack surface, but it's also a vulnerable part of our attack surface. We're seeing some novel attack methods targeted at either the input, so for instance, the poisoning of the data that goes into the model for evaluation, or the integrity of the rule set with which the model was built. And then another concern is the leakage of data through accidental sharing with, for instance, an open source model like ChatGPT or DeepSeek, or missing data labeling. Now, AI is also just another asset. So with asset, I mean IT asset, like a laptop, like a server. It is another thing that needs protecting. And this is, of course, an interesting juxtaposition with my talk earlier on how AI can support us reducing the cybersecurity skills gap. Like, it also brings a lot of new work, right? As you could see from the bar of asking people with the skills for artificial intelligence and security, it brings a lot of new work, and people are eager to get people on board with AI understanding to do AI specific things. Some of these things are just your regular IT asset. It needs registering, it needs security, it needs managing, it needs maintenance, it needs testing. But there's also some new things coming up specific to artificial intelligence. So we're seeing regulation. We're seeing that regulation is prompting some kind of assurance or certification. We see an entire need for explaining to people and teaching them about how something works and how it affects them and how they should be using it. So it's creating a lot of work as well. And it's just another asset that needs protecting, or else it will end up as a target. And for now, I wanted to zoom in a little bit on data labeling, as this is actually a very practical concern that I'm working through with a lot of my customers right now. So data labeling. Data labeling is something that many organizations, and I'm not sure you'll be surprised, but we haven't done that properly. We hate doing it. A, because it's boring. No, but just to be clear, so data labeling is when you have a document, you label it by saying this is confidential or highly confidential. And according to that classification, you might apply some security controls to it, like encrypting it or sharing it with a limited distribution list. So typically, before we did any of that, all of our documents were unclassified. And then at some point, people said we should probably classify documents so people understand whether they can share it with somebody else or not share it. And then we proceeded to not do that at all. Now, why didn't we do that? It is a very unattractive business case with not so good return on investment. You have to imagine, the longer a company is around, the more documents they have amassed. And going through that process and attaching a label to every single one of them, it's not doing anything for your customers. It's not doing anything for your employees. It's definitely not as exciting as bringing that new product to the market. So if competing for budget and time with other projects, this project of data labeling often doesn't make it. For organizations that have done it, it's often looking forward. So organizations say, well, we've been around for 50 years. I don't want to do that for every single document for the last 50 years, but I'll do it from now onwards. Is that okay? So we see that many of them have partially classified their documents. And data cleanups, doing cleanup, looking back at that old data and cleaning it up is a massive effort, as it's really difficult to track down owners, understand what data it even is. So we see that nobody wants to take ownership of data they don't even know what it is. And then you can't just throw everything away that you were not using, because some of these data types have legal retention periods and you're supposed to keep them for like 20 years. We also see many organizations that are a little bit older. They've got these network drives that are just one bunch of folders with many, 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 many documents. And even if they've got written of that, they've now moved to Microsoft Teams, where even though there's a lot of tools to control the sprawl of repositories, teams, and channels there, not every organization uses that. So there's definitely also a distributed growth of data in that area. And then we saw this entire influx of saying, well, here's some tooling. You can just stick a label on it automatically, and then it's done, right? Everything just classified with internal, fine. But the real problem there was that users don't then understand why we even should be doing data labeling. They consider it's done automatically and then don't even think twice about it. And lastly, we've also seen an underinvestment in then a more strategic approach from the architecture side to orchestrate data lifecycle flows. Now, why is this important? Why am I talking about data labeling? If you have, so let me take the Copilot example, since that is the one that I'm working with. If you implement Copilot in your organization and you have not classified or limited access to any data, that means that you can ask it whatever, and it will go and find it for you. So this is a major concern of organizations that are like, oh, I don't want the salaries of my board members to be known by the staff cleaning the floors. And so they're very, very concerned around how data, who can access what data. All of a sudden, this is a concern. And it should have been a concern much longer ago. Like wave one of this concern was GDPR, right? Because GDPR kind of forces you to have an understanding of where your data lives and how it should be taken care of. And so that was the first wave where we saw organizations trying to do some data management. But like I said, it was mostly going forward. And now we're in the second wave of artificial intelligence, where we've got these business leaders saying, wait, I want to implement Copilot. I want the productivity gains, but I don't want everybody to see all of the data. So we need to start labeling data now. And then there's this third wave, which is undoubtedly coming. I'm just not sure when, but that is quantum computing. Because again, there's the question of, in order to understand what data is at risk from quantum computing, we need to understand where that data is, how it is currently encrypted, what are we going to encrypt it with next to take care of that quantum threat. But so now we're in that wave two of people worrying about artificial intelligence, really wanting to go ahead with it, but then not having the data management controls in place to really do that. So we're seeing that shift with AI, and 80% of the leaders cited leakage of their sensitive data as main concerns, and 30% of leaders don't even know where their business critical data is. And this might surprise you, but I affirm this is also my perception of the market. And there's three big concerns that they want to take care of with AI. So one is oversharing. And this is again due to a lack of labeling, where sensitive data is shared in AI apps that should not have been put in there. Data leakage, and then the non-compliant usage. This last one is a little bit different in the sense that it presumes that people can do things. So this goes to the democratization of skills with AI. They can now do things that they previously couldn't do because they've got support of an AI helping them out. And some of these things are illegal. So that's something they seek to take care of as well. But it's
Esther,
very important to not delay. Yes.
I'm just letting you know, there are 10 minutes till the end of the class, or 11 minutes. So just letting you know. Thank you.
Yeah, they're close. Implementing AI at speed is important. So people shouldn't delay this. You can't just say I'm not doing it, because people are using AI of their own. So 55 to 78% of employees bring their own AI tools to work, shadow AI. So if you don't have an enterprise AI selected and implemented, you are still going to see users working with AI, just not with your permission, just not with you knowing about it. And these models, they're often free or freemium, and that even heightens the risk of abuse of that oversharing and that data leakage that we covered on the previous slide. So yes, the enterprise AI is a great way of saying we now use this AI. And actually at Microsoft, we also offer tooling to help you discover what shadow AI is used in your organization, so you can make sure that people stop using that. But that is a reason to not delay the implementation of AI for much longer, even though you don't want to do the data management thing. It doesn't excite you. And the problem is only going to worsen as adoption progresses, because right now I think we're somewhere with the early majority adoption. I don't know, it's because we use it so much within Microsoft. I think my perspective is a little bit like shifted. For me, it's very common, but I think many employees are, first experiencing it, trying it out, rather than using it every single day. So I think as we see adoption take up, we're only going to see more of that shadow AI. So from that security perspective, waiting too long is a bad thing too. Now, to close, we've also prepared a challenge for you. So continuing on this theme that we've covered today, I wanted to take a little bit more of a business view. So I am very interested not just in the concept of what AI can do, but how do we work with it in practice? What does it mean for the organization? So the objective of the challenge that we put to you is to look at the benefits and challenges associated with actual implementation, and then take the perspective of you being a security leader in a real or a fictional business. So I hope you enjoy that. And then wanting to close off is I promised you to tell you what happened to Mayhem. So Mayhem then, from the DARPA Cyber Grant Challenge, continued to compete with human hackers. And it did really quite well, but it ended up coming in last place at the end of the Capture the Flag event held at DARPA. So that was quite sad in 2016, but Mayhem is doing quite well, really. So they have spun up into an official company. They have gotten a contract with the US Ministry of Defense. They have expanded into the commercial space, and they now have a real product offering. So Mayhem is well and alive and kicking. And that goes to show that a student project in 2016 is now an actual commercial offering. With that, I'd love to close and take any questions if you've got them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther, for this wonderful presentation and very opening, I think, also in terms of artificial intelligence, but also in terms of job openings and what this means for the future. And so thank you so much for being here. We received quite a few questions in the Q&A box. Therefore, we will be reading these out. My colleague Elton will be reading them out. And then if we do have some extra time, we will pass to the in-person questions. Elton?
Yes, so the first question, sorry, one second. Yeah, the first question we have is from Constantine Roundhouse, and he asks, in terms of AI being used for incident reporting, is there a risk that AI written reports will in turn be aggregated and summarized using AI by executives and potentially leave out valuable information? Would this pose a salient risk in terms of taking human discernment out of the decision making? And if so, how could we mitigate this risk?
It's a good question. So how this would normally play out if I were to be a CISO? Right, so my guy, he would write an incident report and he would send it to me and I would read it, and I would, if there were any open decisions, I would take open decisions. For instance, on follow-up research, I hear what you're suggesting is to have AI reason over AI generate reports, and by that losing many important details that are in the report. So I think as a CISO, I would never be comfortable losing that detail, because it's my responsibility to make sometimes decisions that really impact the business on the amount of information that I got. So if anything, you'll see a natural tendency from CISOs to gather more and more information before they take that decision, rather than allowing it to be less details. Of course, there's another part of the organization. So if you talk about board members, yes, they would, struggle to understand the details in such an incident response. They would want a almost non-technical version of whatever the incident was covered in a single paragraph so they could cover it quickly. Typically, and this is up to the decision making of the CISO, but typically they don't need more than that, because the CISO would be taking the immediate decisions. So of course there's a risk, I think, but I think knowing the protective nature of a good CISO, they would make sure that the right details are passed on to the board, and that they have sufficient details to do the decision making. And if anything, I think where many CISOs fail is that they think that the board can take much more detail, much more technical, and has much more technical understanding that they really have. So they throw in a lot of details that the board really doesn't want to know about.
Thank you. The next question we have here is also in reference to the discussion about the age demographics for people working within cybersecurity, and then kind of like getting into that workforce. And the question is, what about, or what should be done about the inverted triangle in cybersecurity? The fact that there are too many entry-level people trying to get in, but there are fewer roles at the entry level.
And I think AI is not really helping in this regard. At least that's not what I'm seeing in the wider programmer spectrum, for instance, where we see AI being able to do some of the tasks that junior programmers would be doing. And then we would only keep senior programmers. And there, obviously, you aggravate the pipeline problem because those senior developers are going to go somewhere else at some point, or they're going to retire, and you have not trained any junior developers because you had AI do all of those more basic tasks. So unfortunately, AI is not really supporting us in that area, because I think it is the nature of organizations to say, oh, if we don't need a human, that we need to pay for that, that is really convenient. So that is something that we need to fix as humans. The part where AI can help is that it can be an amazing teacher in terms of getting junior people started up, right? So I don't consider myself particularly junior, but I use artificial intelligence like Copilot. I use it for a lot of things, questions. If I don't know something, if it's not in my comfort zone, it's not within my skill set, I find that when you're learning something new, Copilot can actually be an amazing support in selecting the right areas for you to progress in very quickly. So we do need to convince organizations to continue hiring people, young people that we train up. And then once we hire them, we can use artificial intelligence to get them to scale up very quickly. But I think it goes wrong currently with that human decision where people say, no, I want an experienced person in cybersecurity.
Thank you. Then we have a final question I think we have time for here, which is that on slide 19, you talk about some of the risks that comes with AI, or at least some of the perceived risks, such as oversharing, data leakage, and non-compliant usage. To what extent can these risks be overcome by ensuring that when you utilize AI systems, that they are run locally, essentially, on the devices and the servers of the company in question, and not using external servers?
Yeah, I think to a great part, but again, so it's indeed blocking shadow AI. That is a big component. And then, of course, making sure that you have an enterprise AI to meet people in their needs for AI. And then there is a part on training people on how they should be using it, what it is allowed for, getting your data labeling correct on that internal AI to make sure it only finds the right data. So there's a lot of things that we can technically do to make it exactly as organizations want it. But where I think we often fall is where we don't train people well. So yes, we will give them some training on, I don't know, fun prompts you can ask Copilot, but not actually help them understand the security aspects using artificial intelligence. I know so many people, not going back to the Chinese use case, so many people who in the absence of enterprise AI thought it would be great to just have DeepSeek. And that is absolutely fine if you're using it for personal things, but the moment you put anything from your company in there, you have to realize it's going to China. And that is a risk that you might not be fully aware of and appreciative of unless you've been trained.
Thank you so much, Esther. This was really great. I'm glad we were able to get some questions in. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And I believe now we have a minute to spare, but we have 2 more lectures today. It's a long day for everyone, but it was great to start it off on such a positive note and informative note. I see everyone's reacting, so everyone's really having such a great positive response. Well, thank you so much, and I will see you in 15 minutes for in aviation and cybersecurity. Thank you so much, Esther, again. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.